Zach Graham. I'm a veteran academic counselor with IVETS at the University of Iowa. We're lucky to be joined by JD, who's Director of Programs and Scholarships at the Pat Tillman Foundation, and Tabatha Wenz, who also works at the Pat Tillman Foundation. If you guys could both tell us about yourselves.
Sure, real fast, Zach, I'll kick things off. I'm JD. I've been the Director of Programs and Scholarships here at the Pat Tillman Foundation for about the past 2.5 years. And prior to that, I spent 20 years in the United States Army. So throughout that entire span of my life, at different points in time, I was a veteran student. Obviously, I'm still a veteran. And then whenever it was time for me to retire from the Army, I found this wonderful opportunity that I see to really be able to continue to serve, and specifically continue to serve a really remarkable and extraordinary group and community of veterans, in some cases still active duty service members or service members that are still serving in the National Guard or in a reserve component, as well as military spouses. And that's what I get to do at the Pat Tillman Foundation. So our mission is to unite and empower this remarkable community. We empower that community through the combination of academic scholarships, professional and leadership development opportunities, as well as the cultivation of this really remarkable community that exists within and around the foundation. So as a part of our team, we are in charge of the selection and the process, the allocation of the actual scholarship funds when it's time for that. We host a number of different internal events. We coordinate with a larger number of external allies and partners for external events. And again, at the end of the day, we're in this business of building a community. And I get to do it with a wonderful, wonderful team. And one of those teammates is with me here today. And I'll actually, if it's okay, Zach, I'll hand it over to Tabatha to introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, JD. Hi, everyone. I'm Tabatha. I had the great pleasure in 2013 of being named a Tillman Scholar, so one of the 60 students chosen that year. So I've been around the foundation for a while, but in the last couple of years, I've been able to see really what this community of scholars can do, and I believe so much in the foundation that I pivoted a little bit and came to work at the foundation as a program manager. So now I have the pleasure of every day being able to engage with my fellow Tillman scholars and help ensure that we can continue to offer programming that's beneficial for them even after they have left school. So again, really happy to be here today and hope that we can answer some questions.
Well, thank you for introducing yourselves. And I would also like to recognize we have Chelsea Burke, who's program director for IVETS at the University of Iowa, is joining us. And then Jacob is applying this year for the Pat Tillman Foundation to become a Tillman Scholar, and then Kara as well. So if Jacob or Kara, if you'd like to kick us off with any questions.
Yeah, Zach, so I'm Jake Shillow. I'm a 5th year student in the genetics program. So I've been at Iowa doing cancer research, and COVID has extended me 1 more year. So I get the privilege of applying one last time for the scholarship. So hopefully, things are positive this year.
Awesome.
Okay, and I'm Kara Wuchter. All right, are we ready?
Yep, I'm so sorry. Please go ahead, Kara.
I'm Kara. No, you're totally fine. I'm Kara Wuchter, and I'm a 3rd year in the molecular medicine program in Iowa, actually the graduate program there. And my husband's actually currently deployed, so I'm a military spouse looking to apply. Yes.
Very cool. Great. Excellent, excellent, excellent all the way around.
All right, Jacob or Kara? Yeah. Oh, Chelsea.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt, but I was going to say I have a couple of questions myself, but we'll let Jake and Kara kick us off with their questions.
I mean, I guess if you have some, general questions, Chelsea, that would be good. My questions do get a little more specific, probably. So,
Okay.
having
Well,
done
yeah,
it a few times.
I was curious about, I was reading about the resume portion, and I was curious about what you see in successful scholars' resumes, both in terms of like the form of the resume, the length, what's included, and also the types of service and experiences that people include in that portion. I feel like I have a better sense of the essays than I do of the resume personally.
No, that's a wonderful question, and I think the resume is a really important component. And for me, it is the context into which that component fits is also really, really important too. So when you think about this really long application, the most compelling applications we see are those that most effectively weave the different components of the application into a coherent story. So in many cases, what that resume should be saying actually should be conversant to a degree with the primary themes and the impact statement that's being hammered away at the essays. It should then also, I think, just sort of generally match up with what the essays are also then allowing someone to do in terms of describing what has inspired someone to service, as well as what they want to do in that next chapter. And then that resume can also be a really important piece when you think about that application of linking the essays with the recommender portion as well. And again, it's not a pure blown letter of recommendation. That recommender is answering about 4 or 5 questions about the applicant. But thinking through how all those things can fit together, I think is a really, really important component of conceiving of the resume. Now, in terms of the resume itself, we're looking for generally a typical business-oriented resume. So don't think it needs to be like the federal USA jobs resume, that extremely long document that sometimes can result from that. But usually a 1 to 2 page resume that, again, I would put the emphasis on things that are tying different elements together. When you think about the folks that will be on selection committees, and that's going to be upwards of 25 to 30 different people, that is the audience that you are preparing this entire application for. So members of that audience will be Tillman Scholars, about half of that. Some of them will be longtime supporters of the foundation. In some cases, it will be people who knew Pat himself, but in some of those other spots that are on those committees, it could be somebody that is in business, right? So in some cases, like if it's more of a CV form than a resume, that might work if it matches that context of that your absolute impact is going to be in higher education and academia. That, I think, makes a lot of sense. If you want to take, say, even a highly technical degree and apply it to business, well, you might want to have a slightly different piece that sort of fits together in that broad context as it exists. Tabatha, your thoughts? And again, Tabatha not only has applied, but it's also sat on a number of different selection committees as well.
Yeah, so I mean, really what JD was saying, I look to the resume to kind of fill in some of the gaps that that maybe the essays can't fully address, or the recommendations. So I really love to see service opportunities, community service, volunteer opportunities listed on a resume, as well as any leadership that someone, if you sit on a board or anything like that, to really tie in with our 4 core values: service, scholarship, humble leadership, and impact. I think the resume is a really great way to get across some of that service and leadership. That maybe, there's obviously a word count on the essays, so maybe it's not an area where you can get into everything, but us being able to see that on a resume is really helpful.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I would also sometimes add to this is every so often there's like an instruction within the application particularly as it applies to someone that's applying as a military spouse, and you have to put your significant others like military documentation in just to confirm that piece. Every so often, sometimes those instructions can almost feel like they're building up a momentum that you're having to provide information about somebody that's not you. But please remember, at the end of the day, it is you in whom we are interested in this particular application, unless your significant other is also applying, and then we'll look at both applications, right? But that is, I think, a key thing to sometimes keep in mind, particularly when it comes to the essays. Obviously, the resume has to be that applicant's for it to make sense and have the impact that it has the potential to have. But now that's a great first question, Chelsea.
Can I ask a follow-up question, JD?
Oh, yeah, obviously, yeah.
So do the reviewers get your essays and the resume as one and review them at one time, or is the process to review each individual essay and then move on to the other applicants? Like, I guess, how does that go down?
That's a really interesting question. So reviewers have the ability to review in whatever way they want to. Typically, how they do, I think, as they are moving their way through one application, it depends. Some like to actually start with the resume just because it's sort of a one-stop sort of synopsis of that applicant. Others like to start just right into the meat of those essays that are there. So just as whenever you're in SurveyMonkey Apply filling out your own application, the reviewers are actually, they use that same platform to review your application. So just as you can jump from, like, say, step 2 to step 14, they can jump within that to see whatever piece that they want. So whenever they open up an application that they're going to review, they see a summary, and on that summary, there's your application number. You don't have any identifying names or photos or institutions or things like that, but they'll see what you're majoring in, the specific major, the general impact area. They will then see where the service background is, if it's veteran, active, military spouse. They will see those pieces as a synopsis that's right there too. So sometimes some people like to organize it, and they look at all of their liberal arts in one spot, business in another, STEM in another, healthcare in another. Some do that way, and then some just like to push right through. And generally, a reviewer will have no more than 60 applications that they will review at any one point in our process. But that I think is generally how they go about doing it. Tabatha, what was your approach?
That is exactly how I did it.
Yeah.
Just kind of grouped them by impact area. And then I did always start with the resume, and then I would read letter of recommendation next, and end with the essays, because that's the thing that always speaks to me the most. So it's kind of, you're giving an overview of your story through a resume. Your recommender is telling a little bit about you, and then the essays is kind of my opportunity to really learn who you are and what you want to do with this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really insightful question, and this sort of response has been too, right? Because I mean, one of my general pieces of advice, and you've already heard me say it a little bit already once today, is keep your audience in mind, right? And that applies if you're writing an op-ed, if you're writing an essay, if you're writing an assignment. Keep your audience in mind and be kind to your audience. And then when thinking about how your audience is reading through that, and you're trying to create this story, as Tabatha just said, starting with that resume, going to the recommender, finishing with those essays, I think that's a really effective way to revise your own application, or to ask someone else that knows you very well to also help you in that revision process, to say, I mean, I know, if I were creating the application, I know I would leave something out, and I would have that someone special in my life that would say, hey, knucklehead, what about X or Y or Z? That is a wonderful conversation to probably have in the next week and a half. But great question.
Do you, I guess, de-identify the name from the like resume? I mean, we're given like a code essentially that is affiliated with our application. I mean, should we put that on, say, the CV, or is it fine to have our name on there as well?
It is fine to have the name on there as well. We try to keep it down to a minimum as a whole. So if you can replace it, that would be ideal. But we do know that oftentimes a name slips through somewhere. If it doesn't slip through the CV, it's actually somewhere. It's like on page 3 of like scanned military documents from time to time, and or a recommender will sometimes bring that to bear as well. But we are cognizant of that. Everyone that goes through the review process actually takes some bias awareness training that we offer. It's part of like some of the Harvard-based implicit bias tests that many different institutions use, and we use that as well, just to try and resolve that. And at no point in time is there ever a single vote. Like one set of eyes sees an application and can say either yes or no. It's always going to be at least in pairs and usually in committees, just as it works its way through that. So, and that's just in case, you know, a name does slip through. That name might then potentially trigger an implicit response, and going from there.
A lot of my questions, it goes along with what everybody's been asking, but as a military spouse, obviously I have a very different perspective and angle I need to take when applying for this. So, I mean, especially we were just married here recently too. So of course it's still strange when people come up and thank me for my service. So I was kind of curious your perspective on, you know, good ways to approach an essay with this, or, you know, those sorts of things.
No, great question, Kara. Tabatha, you want to take an initial shot at this one?
Sure. So Kara, you've come to the right place. So I, in 2013, was selected as a military spouse. So happy to answer any questions along that front. So my recommendation to you, especially when doing your essays, would be, and JD already mentioned this a bit, but really focus on you and your story. I actually recently went back and read my essays, and I think that I probably could have done a little bit better job about this. There is a word limit, and I think it's hard for us as spouses who are just used to, you know, always, you know, having this sense of service and commitment and duty. It's hard to not talk about the service of our spouse all the time. But I think for these essays, really important, you know, to highlight that as maybe, you know, a source of inspiration, or, you know, hey, this person is serving in this way, I'm serving in this way. But to really focus the essays on you and what you want to be doing. You know, we want to know what impact you're going to have, not necessarily the impact that your spouse is going to have, though I'm sure it will be wonderful. You know, this is, you know, this would be for you specifically as the applicant. And JD will undoubtedly mention this at some point later, but I think the more times someone hears this, the better. You know, to be a Tillman Scholar is not to be rewarded for service that's in the past. It's really an investment in your future. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're filling out your essays. And then, you know, I'm happy to answer other questions offline too, if you have anything specific about being a spouse applicant.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, that's great to know that you were a spouse as well and found some success in it. So, and also kind of here, I guess too, that was the first time, you know, that the direction, maybe it doesn't need to be as military-esque, but, you know, in the future, what our aspirations are is more kind of what your guys are considering then.
Absolutely. Absolutely on that. So a part of, and so whenever you look at our website and you see the definition of, say, service on our website, I think it's a significant one to take a look at, right? Because we define it as dedication to service beyond self in and out of uniform. Now, a part of the rationale of why our organization has that definition is because we have members of our community that both served in and served outside of the uniform sometimes in the same person, sometimes as a military spouse, and then going on to do something else as part of like the second chapter or the next element of phase of their leadership life. And that forward-looking component is really, really important. The other thing I would encourage you, so when you look at these organizational values that we have plastered in various different spots on our website of service, of scholarship, which is really a lifelong love of learning, humble leadership, right? Being able to lead by example and to lead with that ever wonderful quality of humility, and then impact. Those 4 core values are also explicitly the selection criteria that selection committees apply to Tillman Scholar applicants. That is the bottom line. So particularly as Tabatha mentioned, right? One of the things I say, this is not merely a gift; it is an investment in the future. I think when you think about the future and having those future plans influence and strike the tone of your essays, that helps to scope a resume, that helps to then set up a conversation with a recommender that can offer then a very complimentary recommendation to the story that you're trying to tell as it fits into those 4 values. I think that is the key thing to remain focused on for all applicants. And in particular, I think it's a key thing to remain focused on as a spouse that's applying for this opportunity as well.
Awesome, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. Stay focused in on those, and you won't go wrong in a lot of ways. And I think by staying focused on those, some of the feedback that we've gotten from people going through the application process is that it is a revealing experience, right? You learn something about yourself in that, and that's clearly one of our goals too. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that we do have a very, very tight selection rate at the end of this. Over the past couple of years, it's ranged between about 2.5% to about 3.5%. But one of the things that I think the exercise does allow folks to do is to learn deeply about themselves. I know we see a number of moving, compelling, oftentimes very vulnerable stories that are there. And when those things tie everything together with a clearly focused impact area, usually you will have people on those committees absolutely say, hey, we can argue about this applicant or this applicant, but this one I am going to bat for. And I think that's an important component, particularly when so many people within those committees are so familiar with our community. So I would just encourage everyone to keep that in mind as well.
Those are, great answers. Thank you so much for those. Could you talk about any advice on selecting the right recommender to write the character statement for the applicants?
Sure thing. I'll take the little swipe at this one, and then I'll hand it over to you if you're good with that, Tabatha. But first and foremost, our general advice, and I think it very much rings true with the really effective recommendations that are there, is first go with someone who knows you well, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a very high military rank or necessarily a high academic rank, but someone who knows you well. The second piece of that, which I think is as important, is factor in the time to ensure that recommender understands your half, or really your like 7/8 of the application that's a component of that, right? So I think a series of conversations with recommenders, so they understand what we're looking for at the foundation, right? Pointing them to our website. We've actually created a short YouTube video for recommenders as well, just to help them make sure that they don't register for an application themselves inadvertently, right? It's on that low level piece, as well as then saying, hey, take a look. These are the values that our organization is based off of. This is what this broad process looks like. This is what we need from you. So there's a little video that recommenders can watch on that. But then I think it's important for an applicant to have the conversation with the recommender whose primary point is, this is what I need from you. and this is what I am planning to do. This is the story that I'm trying to tell, the impact I'm attempting to make. How can you help contribute into that as well? I think those are really important components. Folks that, again, know you well, and folks that can attest to how you're going to interact with this community, as well as pursue that particular impact. Candidly, I would recommend away from immediate family members. Once in a while, you see that, and then it tends to, yes, to be sure, the person's going to know you well, but it's potentially too well, right? You want a balance of that familiarity with the degree of objectivity that a recommender, a third-party recommendation can offer into this piece. And when you put it in the context of those really tight selection rates, every component counts on that. And to be able to take that conversation to maximize the opportunity that you have there, I think is probably your best way forward. Tabatha, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think just as important as it is that you understand what you're applying for, it's really important that your recommender understands what you're applying for. I see a lot of recommendations every year where a recommender has kind of extrapolated the scholar portion of Tillman Scholar to just think that this is, just a scholarship, and they write about how the financial, what the financial impact will be and how that will be useful for the applicant. And doesn't really have a full understanding of, this strong network of Tillman scholars and what that means and how that might be beneficial. So I think that would be one point. JD already mentioned, someone that knows you well. I always, when I'm reading letters of recommendation, I look for specific examples, right, that point to those core values that we have. So kind of, to be frank, like the fluffy language of just, this person is dedicated and service is part of their DNA, and those types of things are great. And that's wonderful that they feel, so highly of the person that they're recommending. But I'm really looking for some specific examples. So if you say someone is a humble leader, great, give me an example. And I think that's where we can see on those recommendations where someone really does know the applicant well, and can cite some of those examples. The letter of recommendation is probably the part that I, if I could go back and redo my application, probably would have chosen someone different. I was running the FRG for my husband's unit at the time, and I had his first sergeant write my letter. I'm spending 1 week in a month with this individual, right? Probably not the best person to be able to speak to my character and the impact that I want to have. It worked out, but would probably be something that now that I know more about the process and truly how competitive it is, probably something I would have put a little bit more thought into and made sure that I, if nothing else, was offering up a bulleted list of here's some things that I would maybe like you to cover that coincide with things I wrote about in my essays or that are listed on my resume.
Yeah, and one of the points that Tabatha made also struck a chord with me, and just to offer the reminder that our selection process is based solely off of merit. So yes, within the application, we do ask you to complete a FAFSA. We ask you some information on financial information that's there, but selection committees do not see that information. You're reminded of that in the application itself, but that's an important piece, that those selection committees are solely looking at merit. Once we select the 60 scholars for that particular year, only at that point in time will we on staff will crack open some of that financial information. And so there might be a degree of variance between one Tillman scholar and another in terms of what that scholarship amount is based off need. But that occurs only after all 60 have been selected for that. So that only reinforces what a third-party recommender might have in terms of an assumption. Oh, let me hammer home the financial need that's here. Well, if they do, unfortunately, that's probably just going to be words that are wasted. That could be better spent, much better spent on, again, how you fit into these organizational values that are there, what you want to do in terms of your own impact as well.
Thank you. Jacob, Kara, Chelsea, any further questions?
Yeah, I guess JD, are you willing to talk about the breakdown of, I guess, the selection process itself in terms of, you know, how many applications you start with and then how that gets funneled down to, say, the interview process?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do that. So application though is open for February. So then what immediately goes into action is internal to the foundation. We rapidly transition from a selection season, from an application season to a selection season. And the best way to sort of describe that selection season is that it consists really of four primary phases. The first phase is our initial screening, which takes place about 3 weeks in March, and that's comprised of Tillman Scholars. So depending on the amount of applications that we have, just to keep things, let's say if we keep it at just an even number, if we had 2,000 applications, during that initial screen, we will advance right around 450 to 500 applications to our quarterfinal round. That's probably the best way to sort of describe what that looks like. Then at the quarterfinal round, we have a series of different quarterfinal selection committees. Those committees consist of Tillman Scholars, as I mentioned before. They consist, in some cases, people who grew up, who played football with Pat, right? You know, sometimes it's Pat's former teachers. Obviously, family members will sometimes be a part of that, as well as close allies, benefactors of the foundation on that. So that takes us from around 450 or so applications, and then we take it down to about 100 applications that go to our semifinal round. Our semifinal round occurs in mid-May. That takes us, it's a smaller cut at that point in time, and then that gets us to about 90 or so finalists that then go in front of interviews. And those interviews will generally happen right before Memorial Day weekend, is where we have them templated out for right now. They are 20-minute video interviews. We will conduct them on Zoom. So it's pretty quick, and it's designed just to be able to get to know that applicant a little bit better, provide a couple of questions, and to be able to have a conversation from there. So that's generally the primary gates that we see moving our way through that. And by the end of it, when you add up all those different reviewers, again, you're talking about 30 different folks will have reviewed each of those applications and participated in them. Now, what a reviewer in the quarterfinal round might score, or the notes that they take, those notes and scores don't move forward to the semifinal round. So you have, each application has a fresh start with each of those different rounds that are there. But one of the things that does happen with these different committees is that if a committee member says, hey, I think this is a great applicant, but if I were in the interview, I would love to ask this question. Well, not all those committee members are going to be in the interviews, but key members of the PTF staff will be. So we're able to take essentially some of those notes and guidance out of those committee meetings, input them into the interview if it's something that we really want to take an additional look at or learn more about. That is what occurs during each of those pieces. Did I miss anything, Tabatha? I think that in a nutshell, that's probably the best level of a Zoom deep sort of a description of our selection process we got.
Oh, I don't think you missed anything. I'm tired though, just hearing you talk about all that. I forget every work it is. I mean, it's a very thorough process. You know, I think, you know, you should feel, you know, very proud for even submitting an application, for, you know, doing it. And then the sense of pride that comes with like advancing even past that initial selection. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and we take the time as well, particularly in each of those meetings, if there's like potentially like a specific question, let's say, you know, a resume got scanned in, or a PDF, a second page of a PDF wasn't clear or something like that. If we have the opportunity to fix it, and Tina Bruning, who's our scholarships manager, if she gives you a call in mid-April, answer that phone call, because, you know, we will do all that we can for the applicants that are before those committees to make sure that is all those things are straight. And we also know that sometimes different things change, right? In case if an admission status changes, I think right now all of y'all are probably already enrolled at Iowa, but if sometimes that's not always the case, we're getting different updates on somebody's admission status or the status of their program. All of those different components we try to feed in as near real time as we can be. So that's what's going on in April and May for our foundation.
So I have a question about the optional essays in the essay portion.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, to what degree should applicants be focused on those components, and they're optional? Are they really optional? Is it one of those things where it's optional, but it also is like, if you don't do it, then we don't get this bigger picture of you?
Yeah, it truly is optional. It is, and it's actually something new. That option piece that we added to it really was an immediate reaction to COVID, and again, so we offered it with two sort of assumptions. One, the assumption that COVID has affected us all, right, to a large degree, and we wanted to provide people to have an opportunity to talk about that. But there is no aspect of the specific aspect of what we're looking to, you know, select of, oh, this person didn't have enough, you know, anti-COVID activity, right? You know, it is nothing along those lines. We just want to make sure that we have an adequate of an understanding of that as possible, and also. As candidly, we want to use that optional piece as a statement to people that are applying, for us to say, hey, we understand that this is a year unlike any other. We are going into our second year unlike any other along those lines. So if there is something that's a little bit different, let us know. And that's our intent on both of those. So if it is left blank, it won't have any negative effects on that at all. And we think that if it is filled out, it will then just help us better understand, you know, yet another emerging and dynamic and changing need that we are going to be chasing after for some time as well.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That is clearly our intent, and we actually might put out. That's a wonderful question to make us sort of think maybe we should just add in one additional qualifying statement about why we added that. So thank you for that, Chelsea.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jacob, Kara, any final questions?
I don't think I have any more. Just like hearing what everybody else's thoughts and perspectives are. So.
And JD, Tabatha, any final remarks you would like to have?
Tabatha, any closing thoughts on your end?
Sure. Three quick ones. So first and foremost, there are 694 Tillman Scholars. Those 693 other folks, aside from me, are truly the most incredible people that you will ever meet. I'm so excited to add another 60 to our family, which is really what it comes down to. So I encourage you to get on our website and read the bios of some of these individuals, and read what they're working on and find some inspiration from that. And it's not to compare yourself to them or to make you think, oh, I could never be a part of this, because you're here now. You're taking these steps to make sure that you're putting together a good application. So you already are one step closer. So keep pushing forward. I know it's a really long application, but it's worth it. Of all the things I've ever applied for and been granted, this is the one that I've been able to continue to pull the most from, because it's a lifelong opportunity and network. So I guess that was kind of points 1 and 2. Third point, I would just say, just one more time, when you're writing your essays, just don't sell yourself short, right? Like, you are the only person that can tell us your story. We, as much as we can try to fill in some of the gaps and try to understand, what it is that you're saying, if you can be clear and succinct and just tell us, what impact you want to have, that's going to make it a little bit easier for us as we're making those tough decisions in the end. So don't sell yourself short. We all know that you're very humble. That's the great part about being part of this community, is all of us are humble leaders. But part of being acknowledging that you're humble is also acknowledging that you need to share a little bit more about yourself than maybe you would normally be comfortable with, just so that we can know who you are.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think just as that reminder, it is a very, very tough cut, but one of the interesting statistics that I've seen over at least the past 2 years, of the 60 Tillman Scholars selected, in between 20 and 22, I'd add a third each year, are a repeat applicant in one form or fashion, whether it's their second, third, fourth, in some cases it's their 5th time in applying. And I think that's an important component to continue to tell that story that Tabatha just described as a remarkable of a way, and as authentic of a way as possible. Because the other key thing, that beyond than just that scholarship, once a Tillman Scholar, you will always be a Tillman Scholar, even when you're done with the matriculation of your actual degree. We are very, very serious and very much focused on expanding different opportunities we have for professional development opportunities, leadership development opportunities that are there. That is both in terms of internal programming that we will be doing, external and partnered programming that we will be doing as well. And it's just such a wonderful catalyst. The community is such a wonderful catalyst for that future change, is a key thing to keep in mind. So more than anything, the last piece that I will say, beyond good luck, and I'll say that one last time as well, right, is that one of the key things that I think, the more time I've spent around the Tillman Scholar community, one of the key common threads that I see within each of those remarkable individuals is this conviction that their best years of service still lie in front of them. I think that's a really, really remarkable piece. And already, each of y'all are making an investment in terms of your own education and the pursuit of that higher education. And then if you're able to ably convince those committees of leaders that your best chapter, your best years of service are still in front of you, and you're also as committed to joining this really remarkable group of like-minded veterans, service members, and military spouses, I think those are key themes to keep in mind. So again, I know Zach, Chelsea, thank you so much for piecing this together, putting this opportunity together. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun just being able to review these pieces. And again, to everybody that is either on this call or watching the video, best of luck, and we greatly look forward to reading your applications here in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you so much, and hope you have a good night. Stay warm.
No promise yes on the good night, no promise on the staying warm, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, thanks JD and Tabatha, we really appreciate it.